So yeah, I just wanted to chat with you a bit just about your poetry, very like informal. I thought I'd start at the beginning, classic. Like when did you first start writing poetry?
Ooh, ooh, when did I start? I guess yeah, I started I guess quite young. I feel like the most profound or clear memory I have of writing, that's a lie. I think around like 14.
Yeah.
I was writing on my phone. I remember literally, was it here? Yeah, I've been here since I was 11. I would just like stay by my windowsill and just be like writing poems onto my phone at night, looking up at the stars, like the
Love
artists
that.
that I like artists do. And yeah, I just started writing poems there. I think I wrote a poem about my hair. It was really short. But I also have a really clear memory of me writing poetry in year 9 and really loving it and in Miss Madden's class. I remember the time I was very straight, and the poem was called "Ben is my friend," and it was like it follows a story of Ben is my friend, but now he's also my husband. It was actually quite. I like the repetition of it. It was like Ben is my friend, and this happened. Ben is my friend, and then it just like throughout the years of like navigating their relationship until they became married. So, so that was in year 9. But I guess the first time I ever performed poetry on stage, and my kind of definition of when it started for me, especially, was Uni Slam in 2018. I was part of the University of Leicester. I went there for university, studied psychology at the time, completely not creative, and I've claimed that back after uni. But yeah, I started in 2018 and was on poetry, University of Leicester, team of 4, and that's where I did my poem, Dear Black Cloud, for the first time in front of an audience. So that would be like my first performance, my first initiation into, oh, I can do this as maybe something more.
Interesting. It's interesting you say that, like, because obviously a lot of your poetry is about your identity, like your Ghanaian heritage, your like being queer. And I just find it interesting that you know, that first poem when you say, oh, when I was straight, like you were writing before you had even these like things inside you that you wanted to write about. Do
Yeah.
you think poetry has helped you explore those aspects of your identity?
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. I specifically remember knowing I was queer in year 9, but kind of, yeah, in when I went to Unislam for the first time, I wrote a poem about Dear Black Cloud. It was completely straight. Like it wasn't not straight, but I didn't really talk about my queerness in my poem at the time. And yeah, I remember going in and I remember specifically there was specific unis like Queen Mary's, and everyone was just talking so candidly about their queerness. And there was this one particular poem about being Catholic and queer and sitting at the dinner table with a family and what that looks like. And I was like, next year, when I come back, I'm going to come back to Unislam and I'm going to do a queer poem. And that was like it was just so beautiful to me to see myself in someone else in that way. And I was like, in that moment, I told myself, like, this next year we're claiming that for ourselves. And from then I got the courage to start writing queerness and start performing it into my poetry as well. So
Yeah,
yeah.
that's amazing.
Oh wait, I don't know if I got to the question. I guess
Don't worry, I was interested.
but in terms of, yes, that was the first moment. But I think I think it's definitely helped me, especially last year, and especially when it comes to figuring out that I was non-binary. I was holding all of this emotion during lockdown. And I remember I didn't know where to put it. I was kind of navigating it with one of my closest friends, and she was really helping me through it and what pronouns mean, what does it mean to be non-binary. I had no idea if I could even slot myself into that.
Mm.
And I remember the poem. I was doing BBC Words First at the time. We had to figure out 2 poems that you had to figure out what poem you wanted to take forward. And there was this one poem that I ended up just keeping for me, but it was the first time I actually started to like jot down the confusion as well as the what was going on
Yeah.
and it was on paper, it was there for me to see, and I was like, this is documented, this is how I feel. And it was like, okay. And even then it's changed so much to how I navigate like being non-binary. And so I think it helps me to figure out what is it, all the jumble that's going on, like to make sense of it on paper is a really powerful thing for me as well.
Yeah, definitely. It's very interesting you say that about, I've had exactly the same thing about coming to terms of non-binary identity. And there is something about lockdown which made everyone sit with their thoughts, look at themselves and be like, what am I? Who am I? I completely resonate with that. So I think that's brilliant. I guess you said about being able to write down your thoughts. I wonder sort of what is the process, because you do performance poetry, that's somewhat different to like poetry that's designed to be read. What is your process in firstly getting those thoughts down, looking at it and thinking, right, this needs to be a performance piece? Is there a way that you sort of navigate making it into a performance piece, or do you think it naturally sort of comes out in that way when you write it down?
It's shifting a lot. It's shifting a lot because I think before I would say I was like spoken word poet, performance poet, but I feel like it's shifting. I've actually been published for the first time, and the book launch is coming. Yeah, tomorrow actually is a book launch, which is exciting.
Wow.
Yeah, it's like an anthology of like Black British history. But how do I navigate? How do I go? It's weird. I think, again, the process has changed a lot. I think when I first started poetry, it was very like, I don't know how to describe it. I was very storytelling, as in I'd get an idea in my head, and I think I was kind of like trying to tackle all of the subjects to do with that subject in one piece. But I'm understanding now that poems can be slightly shorter, or that I can really hone into one particular part. Yeah, I guess how did the process? I think it was just I think I see things very visually. And so I have a clear kind of understanding of what it is that especially in the beginning, I had a clear understanding of what it is I wanted to say and what topic it was. And I don't know how to describe it. It's like the flow state where I'm writing and I get lost in it. And I'm just like surprising myself with like what's going on and like seeing it so clearly. And then I just come to an end where it's like, okay, we're done now. That feels like an end. And then I guess what's changed now is I think the flow state still exists, but I think I allow myself to surprise myself more in the sense of like, I'll have a loose idea of what I want to say in my head, and I'll still see it very clearly, but I don't know, I guess I surprise myself and I allow the editing process to come in a lot more. I think that's what shifted a lot, is that I'll have the bulk idea and I'm like, oh my God, I feel like this is a good idea. And like, I really like how vivid it is. But then I'll try and like, just change the words a bit more, kind of like see what fits a bit more, figure out maybe what form it would live on. And I think that's what shifted a bit more for me, is that I want to get to the place where my poems live on the page as well as on the stage, where I'm figuring out that there's ways to make a poem perform on the page in the sense of like white space and white space and where the words sit and what you do and how a poem looks tells you a bit about the emotion or influences emotion. And so I think in that understanding, it naturally conveys in my voice now. It's not just up to my voice to convey that emotion, which is really exciting. I guess that's where I'm at. I'm trying to get to a place where my poems can live in both mediums. But I guess before, it wasn't even a choice of like, I'm deciding that this poem was performance. It was that everything was a performance poem because that's how I started out. I think all my poems, though, I want to get to a place where I'm starting to write loads and loads and loads of poems. I think sometimes I write a bulk of work in a project and then I kind of like use those poems over and over. I want to get to a place where I just create like a body of work where some of them just live on the page and some of them are just more on the stage. I think where I'm at right now, though, and probably for a long time, all of my poems will live on the stage because that's where I started. And yeah, I love performing. So yeah.
Yeah, I really love that, and like I write a fair bit of poetry, but I never perform, so it's really really interesting to see someone who's started with more performance pieces.
Mm.
I don't know, you say that you want to have like more things to write. Do you have like loads of books or notes pages on your phone full of words? Are you writing constantly? Are you know,
Mm.
or is this something that you sit down and you think, okay, I'm gonna write something?
It's very irregular, and I think I want to try and find a practice. I think it's because of freelance work. Things are just sometimes I don't know what's going on. Like things are just like very back to back. But you know,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a bad one. But yeah, I can't remember what the question was. You said,
Sort of, do you sort of write a lot, like if you're out in the, I don't know, so you're on like a commute, you suddenly get an idea, are you constantly writing things down, or are you sort of
so I guess
taking time aside to write instead?
yeah, it depends. It depends. If I, for example, like if I'm on projects like the one I was just on, or like BBC Words First, and I know I'm sitting down to write, but I have been trying to write a little bit more just for myself. And I know there are poems, like even when I've done collectives or just for myself, like I feel like I have like three filled poetry notebooks where I know there are poems in there that I just need to collate and like develop, and documents of poems I might have started and kind of like yeah, just started. And I know that when I read them back, I'm like, babes, like this is like, you should write this and you should like adapt it and you should build on this. And like it's so many different facets of queerness, or it's so many different facets of culture, whatever it is. And there's so many different ways I found to talk about it, and I know that that's allowed. And I think it's giving myself permission to be like, oh, this is repetitive, quote unquote, because it's not repetitive. It's just a different way to talk about the different nuances of that experience. I also think that my practice is also quite like, I do quite, I guess, a few things. And so in many ways, I think poetry and music lend itself to each other, where I find myself like, there was this other night where I was just about to sleep, but there was a song just ringing through my head. And I was like, you must get your laptop immediately. You can't get your phone because you'll go on Instagram, but get your laptop and record it into a voice memo. And I think in many ways, sometimes poetry is like that as well, where there'll be a specific idea, and if I don't at least jot it down or like recircle it in my head so it's like I can recall it later, then the essence and the exciting nature of it disappears, if that makes sense.
That makes complete sense.
Yeah, so it's kind of sporadic, but I'm trying to find a practice. It's kind of like, yeah, I've got a lot of poems. I know if I just look through, I'd have a lot to like build upon.
It's just time consuming as well. It's a lot to sift through old things and be like, oh, where can I find something new, or is this tiny bit, can I build on that? Especially if you've got other commitments, it's a lot to sit down and do.
It's a lot to sit down and do. But it's so valuable. I know that it would be so valuable. There's specific ones even that I've sifted through and that are ringing through my head right now, where it was like such specific experiences. But I think as well, I'm trying to make trying, not always, I think it's important to write about the difficulties of things, but I'm trying to also make a shift to write about just joy and like capture joy in poems, and then the queer experience, because I think there is a lot of joy to be found as well. So finding the balance between, okay, this is something hard that I'm going through, and this is why I want to document it, to give it space to breathe and live, and it's important to talk about it, but also how can I capture joy, or a mixture, a bittersweet, which maybe I do, but yeah, it's just trying to find the balance, I guess.
Yeah, that's interesting you say that. I think like queer joy or black joy should be celebrated, but it almost feels sometimes harder to resonate that with people. I feel like, I don't know if you saw that article recently, it was like, why do artists owe us their sadness? And there's something about the fact that like a lot of creative people, sadness resonates with audiences more, and I think there's a lot of creatives that are trying to shift that and write more, or create more things that surround joy, I think, which is really lovely. But it's interesting that sadness sits with people more. I don't know if it invokes more emotions or feelings. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think as well, I think sometimes poetry can be a release and a place to put things. And sometimes I find myself going to my journal when things are hard. I'm like, babes, we need to come here when we're also okay. So we can look back and we can see we were good too. I think it's like that spilling happens often when we need to let something out. But I also know what you mean in the sense of like empathy. Sometimes empathy, and sometimes even within music, sometimes you're looking for a poem or you're looking for a song that sees you, that doesn't try and change where is you're coming from or what emotion you're feeling. It just it gets it, you know what I mean? So I don't know. I think both are important in many ways, but I hear you.
I was gonna ask, so you were saying before, like when you were younger, sat on the windowsill looking out at the world, when you've got a bit of writer's block or you're really feeling uninspired, where do you look for inspiration? Is there a particular place, or do you looking inwardly, anywhere that you go to immediately and think?
Memory is my favorite thing to write about, is my favorite thing to recall. I think a lot of my stuff is quite introspective in many ways. It can be quite present, but I think I've been writing a lot about history, and I also write a lot about childhood, or I don't know, or not necessarily. Sometimes it's quite present, but I think memory is a very important thing for me to tap into, because I think they're precious, and I think they tell me a lot about where I am right now. It's not necessarily a living in the past, it's more an understanding of my present, in the sense that, like, I don't know, like there's just certain things. It's like when you hear a TV, like you watch a TV show or you hear a song that was like so linked to your childhood, or maybe it's like a like for me, X Factor.
We were talking about it. Yes, love it.
You know what I mean? It's like, for me, that was meant a lot because I've always wanted to do music, but I think it also, sometimes nostalgia hurts because it can tell you what's important to you, but also what's missing. And the fact that you want to go down like a creative path or music, or maybe that hasn't been accessible, or, you know, heritage can be important because it's like, it tells me that I'm still connected to it, but it feels quite hard to think about belonging to my heritage because of queerness and the queer laws and the homophobic laws that are coming and taking place right now that we're protesting against. I think, memory is my favorite place. This windowsill is also my favorite place. And the canal water is something that I look to a lot to calm me and to write by. I think memory, there's something about memory and light as well. Like that's something I've been wanting to write about for a long time. I think the lighting, even sometimes I wake up in the morning and I move and I dance to music and stuff, and the lighting changed in the room and it reminded me of a bus journey. It reminded me of a bus journey. It reminded me of when I was in year 8 and I was in therapy. Sometimes I'll be in a certain room, or like the lighting will come in and it will remind me of a Sunday, or like the lighting in the corridor will change and it reminds me of September. I don't know how to describe it, but I think light
makes complete sense.
And memory is a very powerful thing, because we constantly have them, and memory can be either just yesterday's memory, or it can be like years back where something clicked and you understand where it is your behaviors or your essence is coming from, essentially.
It's really interesting. Wow, I love that. I was just gonna touch on, you say some things can be quite almost like painful to write about just because of the way things are. Do you think the poetry community is a safe space for marginalized identities? Do you think there's a section of it that's been very welcoming to you, or has there been some resistance? Also, if there's anything you don't want to talk about, obviously you have to talk about it.
I think this one will be slightly vague, only because I think the community is very tight-knit, and so there are still certain places that was very hard for me to exist in, that I still interact with those spaces and I still interact with those poets, but making peace with those places as well. I think there are definitely some spaces that, especially for me when I was starting out, there was definitely some spaces that nurtured me to get to the place where I felt like I could be better, and I recognized that maybe there were some gaps, and there were some places that othered me, maybe without realizing, but maybe othered me in the sense of like, this is the way to navigate poetry, and maybe this is more of the poetry we might write in this space. And feeling quite disconnected from the two and not knowing how to bridge the gap, and so almost not even being sure if I was going to continue poetry at a certain point. But I think in all of the spaces I've been in, even if some have been harder than others, I've definitely taken some things away. I think there is definitely something to be said about writing in a community. I think that, or just continually going to a place where you learn how to do different styles of poetry. I think it definitely, without realizing, infiltrates in you, and you're better for it.
Yeah.
You're better for it. And so you find yourself going back, even if it's a harder space, because it's important, even if it's interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think more or less, in a general sense of the word, I think there are different communities of poets in different ways and different styles, but I think generally the poetry community is a very beautiful, beautiful community, and is very welcoming, and is very, I don't know, it's like a accelerated way to connect in many ways, because even if it's not like crazy specific and direct, you recognize something or an emotion changes in with you, and then you want to go talk to that person, or you see yourself in a poem. I think it's definitely one of the places where, for example, for me being like, you know, Black non-binary, where in other mainstream art forms, you're like, oh, will I maybe get as far as I want to because of this identity? Poetry says you come as you are, and we're all here.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it's just something, it's very, it just sees you. I think poetry and the community sees you. I think it's a beautiful space for sure. Like, it's helped me so much. And yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I think that's the general consensus.
Oh, thank you. I was just more, this one's more for the newspaper. It's sort of, what advice would you give someone who wants to get into writing or performance or both, but hasn't done it before, is a bit nervous?
Oh, I think, without trying to sound too cliche, I think for me, that's how I started.
Yeah.
Is when I first started poetry, I'd seen it online, and like in RE class, there was this one spoken word poem about like Jesus. But then there was also Sarah Kay. And I feel like your spirit and your soul knows. Your spirit and your soul knows what it wants to do, you know, and you may see it and you'll be like, there's an affinity to it. You might want to go watch it a lot, or you just find yourself searching it up quite a bit. And when I first started spoken word and I found out about Unislam, I was like, wow, that's so cool.
Yeah.
And when I did it, I was terrified, and I wasn't sure if I was going to be any good. But I think there's something in you that knows that you keep coming back, and that maybe there's something here, and then something clicks. And I remember, even as I was getting, you know, doing different projects and getting, I guess, further and further into it, and I guess, you know, excelling in it and doing well, I was always like, will this work? Especially when I came to London from university, I was like, will I get anywhere with this? Will I? And I think it's consistency. I think that's what I would say to a writer. If you want to do it, and just keep going at it and be consistent with it. Keep applying to things. There's been so many rejections, but there's also been so many successes throughout that. So I'd say just keep consistent with it. And if you want to, that's it. My motto, which is something I return to, and I think it's ingrained with me, so I even forget it's my motto, because I think it's just what my soul goes by, is I guess it's this whole quote where it's like, you know, people are always saying don't be afraid, and being afraid is saying don't be afraid is like don't flinch in front of a fire, don't like, you know, if someone tries to punch you, don't move, don't be alive. Like we're all afraid, you're afraid, I'm afraid, and we're always going to be afraid. So what we should be saying isn't don't be afraid, it's be afraid, it's okay to be scared, but do it anyway. You know, do it through, you know, you're shaking, and my leg was shaking when I was up there for the first time, but like I'm doing it regardless because I have something to say. And so I think that's what I would say to them is like, you're going to be terrified, you're going to have a lot of doubt, but be consistent with it, do it anyway, and you'll actually see so much just like unfurl and blossom before your eyes as you just keep going. Like it will pay off. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. That was so inspiring. I love it.
Thank you.
And any just like more any words that you've been reading or listening to recently that you would recommend? Anyone that's stuck in your brain recently that's inspired you? Or...
Yeah, I think for me,
or is there someone that you're like, this person, they are my go-to like writer?
I'm trying to, I don't know, my attention span is a bit crazy, but like I'm trying to like just get through. I've got so many books that I just need to read.
No, that's me with this bookshelf. I'm like, wow, these books that I have not read.
Yeah. Actually mad. Like I'm like, babes, come on, please.
I don't know if I just buy more.
Same.
Like books, but
I've got so many. Like the other day, I bought, what's it called? The Nez Smith, Don't Call Us Dead. Oh my God, incredible. I've read some of the poems and I've also listened to them online and they're incredible. And I think as well, them being Black and non-binary and writing about poems, I'm just like, oh my goodness, Jay Bernard as well. Just like kind of read parts of the collection, but need to go through all of them. But I guess 2 collections I've kind of read all the way through. The person I kind of started spoken word on was Sarah Kay, who I will always love and will always adore. And I think the way she builds image is just so incredible to me. It kind of takes me back to like Kathy Cassidy when I was really young, just like image building for me really, what's the word, really kind of like influenced the beginnings of like my writing journey and you know, childhood as well as up to now. I don't think I'll ever stop building image, but I guess someone who writes really sharply and poignantly and unapologetically and uses whatever language is, you know, sticks out and is, I don't know how to describe it, just uses the language that he needs to use to tell the story in its purest essence is Caleb Femi. Oh my goodness, poor. I was like, sometimes I'd just pause and I'd be like, what? Like, huh? And like just so powerful. And again, I think he teaches me that you can write about the same kind of subject of like Blackness and Black boyhood and a love letter to Black masculinity without having to, I don't know, like you can just do it time and time again, and each time it can show a different part of it. And it just stirs you, as Michaela Cole said in the beginning. Believe it. I mean, yeah, he's incredible. He's absolutely incredible. And had the opportunity to see him read live as well. Like he, that poem really, taught me how to like let words live on a page, but also you can do what you want, like just be creative with it. So I think, that's a poetry collection that I've definitely like read all the way through. And I was like, this sticks. And then Nez Smith is incredible, just as is. Yeah. And Rachel Long is amazing. And I get to she gets to be my teacher for like the next year. Because BYP, I just got in, which starts tonight. Yeah.
Oh, well done. So much to celebrate. You're amazing.
Thank you. Thank you.
Fantastic. And you said you've got the anthology coming out tomorrow?
It's being published with Ink, Sweat and Tears. Spread the Word, the Runaways Project. We just spent like the past 3 months kind of reading research, doing our own research, and telling the stories of Black British enslaved people in the UK. Like we just don't hear a lot about the UK's history, even though this is where it started. And just kind of claiming back the stories of the enslaved people here and that like what they endured, and it was no better. And when they ran away, the communities they built, the heritages they came from, and the pain they endured, like all of it, all of the bittersweet nature, as well as I wrote a poem as well on just like how things haven't really changed. It's literally called Nothing's Changed. And just like future meets past in many ways. Just queerness, of course, brought queerness into it, made it the first poem. I'm really excited, and just like almost a reimagination of history and claiming back their stories on our terms, which is really exciting. And it's published against like this really cool people. I'm just like, this is an honor. Like Montasma, which is really exciting, and Boyega, and I'm really excited.
You smashed it.
Yeah, I'm excited. I've just been jumping about yesterday. I was like, oh my God, this is so fun. Yeah, good things for
really
sure.
Good things. Oh, well done you. It's very well deserved.
Thank you so much.
That's okay. I think that was everything. I think we've touched on pretty much everything. I'm really excited for Friday. I'll probably be there in the corner with my notepad, just writing things down. But no, it'll be really exciting. It'll be lovely to meet you in person. I'm excited to see what everyone chats about. But thank you so much for your time. I've had a really lovely chat. It's been very insightful.
This has been great, honestly.
And congratulations on all your achievements. Amazing. And I think that was everything.